All right, good morning. Good morning. We are live. Jenny White, the Jenny White, is going to be a little bit late. She's in a very important meeting that she won't fill us in with yet because she doesn't want us to know anything about all the stuff she's always doing behind the scenes. So we'll be excited whenever she gets on with us. And we've got Jana Belcher and Robert Scott. We're going to talk a lot of education legislation. And before I bring them on real quick, we're going to have a nice presentation also with that. Before I bring them on, I think most of us probably watched the State of the Union address last night. I thought it was pretty interesting. One thing I want to say, though, is, and I'll have some articles and some things on this maybe at the end of the podcast or later. Trump talked about taking the Panama Canal back, and it was going to be in U.S. hands. If you haven't seen the news this morning, I went and looked. As soon as he said that, I went and started searching the news. The only issue I have with that is who's going to be taking the Panama Canal over is going to be BlackRock. You know, the big globalist bad boy who's in bed with China in the first place. And I'll show you some articles and things on that. I don't necessarily agree with that in any way. I'm not excited about BlackRock taking the Panama Canal over. But that's beside the point. So we'll bring Robert and Jana in here. Good morning. How are you guys?
Good morning.
Good morning. Fantastic.
All right. Well, yeah, excited to have you on here. Talk. We've got to always keep track of these legislators and all the bills they're running through. Make sure somebody's watching them. So I'm glad you guys are out there for sure.
Well, and trying to, because there's a lot of bills and they get snuck through. So.
Wonderful. Yeah. I know I've been on here before, but just to recap real quick, I'm here today with Constitutional Home Educators Alliance. And so my primary function there is we watch legislation that could affect home education. And we also, by doing that, see all the other stuff as well, stuff that's going on in the realm of education. And not just education, but appropriations and they change categories. You can't just type in education anymore. A lot of it falls under economic, like the workforce ready type stuff falls under different categories. The budget and appropriations.
Workforce development.
A lot of it falls under that. A lot of it falls under, possibly even agriculture and health and parental rights. Because some of the things cross over. They're used to seeing a lot of children in schools, and that's how they enforce some of the, or try to enforce some of the medical vaccination, those types of things. So,
I'm very familiar with that, with our lawsuit to Edmond fighting that with the discrimination of unvaccinated kids. But just to recap, Jana, for those that may not know, Oklahoma's probably literally the most protected home education state in your opinion. Would you agree? Probably has the best protections.
Right. For about 23 years I've been home educating in Oklahoma, and actually I was homeschooled myself, or correspondence schooled in the state of Oklahoma back in the ancient days. Maybe I shouldn't say exactly when, but in the 80s, my parents actually educated me for different reasons. But Oklahoma has gone through its waves, and this type of legislation that we're going to talk about today is kind of new. But then the attack on freedoms of parents to educate their own children has been going on for years and years.
And Jana, would you say?
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, would you say I've heard a lot of stories from homeschoolers from the 90s and 80s that there was a lot of, the public school system coming into their home, knocking on the door, trying to find out what they were doing. And it seemed to be like through the late 90s and early 2000s, there was like a renaissance of home education freedom from some of the groups that were established years back. I mean, I don't know what your experience was.
Right. Well, my individual experience was pretty my family had a reason. My dad was an evangelist, and so, well, he still is, but he took his family on the road, and so we had to do something different because we were traveling full time. We actually used a private company that mailed all of our homeschool books to us.
Okay.
And unlike the true constitutional freedom that we currently use in our own family, they did send, unit study tests, or once a month they sent something back to the school. But that was my parents' choice. It wasn't because someone forced them to do it. So they used a correspondence school type thing. But yeah, as far as the state was concerned, they didn't ask questions or anything. So
Yeah, great. Well, you wanna get into this presentation?
yeah, I
sure.
think a lot of this is explained as we go through it. Thank
Okay.
you, Robert, for putting this together.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
just let me know, and I'll slide through that for you.
Yeah, I thought it would be good to provide a little history first to see where we're at, and then what has gone, what's been happening, and what the future might hold. But me myself, I just wanted to say that I'm a homeschooling father of 5. My wife does predominantly most of the homeschooling, but I've gotten involved just because I see how great homeschooling is, and then I also see from the other side maybe an intrusion from the government from our freedoms that we currently have. And so when the school choice passed, I got more involved and run across Constitutional Home Educators Alliance and other groups as well. So I've gotten to work with Jana here for probably a couple of years now. But anyway, this is a presentation. I've kind of tweaked it and updated it, but it's what we have gone around and given to like co-ops and whatnot to give them a little background of where we're at. And to start off, we just talk about the types of homeschooling that you might see across the state, in which you have your public school, your traditional government school, government funded, and then there's this other branch of the online charter schools, which is also, I would say, publicly funded. And then we have our traditional private schools, were completely independent of the government. However, as of recently, there's been somewhat of a divide, I guess you might say, because of the state funding of private schools. And then, of course, I've got down here at the end homeschooling as those, as all of us might know, those that are independent of the government. We might call ourselves homeschoolers. So.
Right, and I have a presentation very similar, and we point out that public education, the definition from the legislative side, and the way we explain that is public education is publicly funded and institutionally directed. So you have a different entity directing the bureaucracy of it, all the way from curriculum choices to standards to methods of delivering it and methods of grouping the children, so to speak, like grades and whether it's brick and mortar. There's all kinds of magnet schools, brick and mortar schools, charter schools, and then, of course, the infusion of the online school back when the internet capabilities got stronger. And so then the private schools used to be, like you said, Robert, privately funded and institutionally directed. So a parent would choose a private school, they would fund it, but it was directed by that institution. Of course, parents have a say, when they put their child there. And then, of course, home education is the only one that the parents direct it and the parents fund it. And then we'll see later in the presentation how that's becoming blurry.
Yeah. And then that's the next slide. It talks about what most of us might define what homeschooling is, and I wrote down, or we wrote down here, free of government influence and obstruction, and then quotation other means of education, which I think in the next couple of slides it goes into where that's
that
defined.
wording.
That wording. But I wrote also a couple of different homeschooling types that we've observed, and those are like the traditional. You might see a co-op where a group of families get together and have offer homeschooling classes, and those actually, we went and gave a talk in Nawada, and they actually offer that, for families that are trying to get out of, they offer a co-op. uh, I think it was it was volunteer, and they were, trying to help parents that didn't really have a means to leave the public school system. They provided this co-op to help them do that, so those exist out there as well.
Wait,
And
Robert?
yes,
Well, first of all, good morning.
good
Thank
morning.
you,
Guys for
Jenny.
being here.
Hi.
So sorry I was late. So Robert, I'm just curious. It didn't sound like the government needed to come in and do any of that.
Right, yeah, that's
Really?
that.
This
Well,
was
they did it. They
completely
did it.
free of government.
This has been going on for some time, apparently.
So what I find interesting, Robert, is Robert's relatively new to this as far as discovering some things. And I started my first co-op about 21 years ago, actually 22 years ago.
Wow.
My current 30-year-old daughter was around 8 years old. And this is what I tell legislators and people all the time. And even these bleeding heart nonprofit groups that are like, but we've got to have something and all. And I'm like, as much time as you spend up here lobbying legislators to give you money to start an organization that will go do this for these families, I said, there's already neighbors and churches and homeschooling families right down the street from them that are willing to help them
And
without government intrusion. And
Yeah,
we've been doing this for years.
and what does government intrusion do? It breaks up the community.
Right. And it
We-
makes us divided. It really
So yeah,
does.
there's definitely I definitely had an eye opener moment at the Randall University. Jana holds the Chia holds their was it Chia? But anyway, that was
Yeah, Randall hosts it. Freedom to Answer the Call.
That's right. Yeah.
Expo. Yeah.
So that was a real eye opener, educational experience for me a couple of years ago about homeschooling.
Before you change slides, Robert, real quickly, I'm going to put a tag here, a note, so you guys can ask this in a minute. I believe that the first one on here, co-op, I do believe that this is where the current attack is taking place for government control. I know it's coming to the whole home education community eventually, but I believe it's taking place at the co-op. And
So why? Can you tell me why?
Well, like I said, I've been doing this for about 22 years as far as co-ops are concerned, and they're becoming to look a lot more like schools or private schools or one-day schools. And I see in the social media, people are coming up with new terms. They're calling them new things because they don't act like a traditional co-op. So back in the day when it was just 5 or 10 or 20 families that, hey, I'm really good at sewing. I'll do some sewing and teach it to your kids. And hey, you're a scientist. Can you do some science lessons with my kids? And they're truly creating their own subgroup to just explore things that they're good at and teach them to the kids. And I've seen that switch to, I'm going to drop my child off at your co-op, and we're going to make sure they have an English and a math and a reading and a science while they're there. And
Right.
it's just not what the traditional co-op was. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the co-op offering those types of things. I just see the trend of what's driving it.
Well,
And
I think, well, you and I
structure.
talked about this one time, and we talked about the fact that sometimes, and there's no way to get around this, it's just a fact, sometimes co-ops, homeschool co-ops are used as a dumping ground for kids that can't make it in public school. And so parents come in with this idea that it's just like public school, and they drop their kids off and take off and don't understand that there's a whole, that's not what homeschooling is about. So I really do think so much of this goes back to parental education about what homeschooling is. I mean,
Right.
don't you think?
Parental involvement is paramount to kids' education, to their success in education. I mean, there's just no way around it. If the parent's not involved, I mean, that's been my experience just as from my childhood to being a
Right.
parent myself.
And that doesn't mean that a parent with alternative circumstances, caring for elderly parent or working full time or a single parent or going through some kind of a medical crisis, that does not mean that they can't homeschool. In fact, at our conference that Robert mentioned coming up in June, we do have several workshops, and they're going to cover that. Anyone can homeschool. It doesn't, if it's your desire to truly raise your children according to the nurture and admonition of the Lord, including their education, then God will provide those things. And it looks different for different people. So I think that's kind of what Robert meant here with independent and unschooling. Those are just three of the categories that a lot of people talk about.
Yeah, and independent is more like what Andrea and I do. We're more on our own, but Andrea does. My wife organizes group events like a science fair, and she does all these little ballon slime events that she goes into town to get people together. But
Your wife is the most amazing person I have ever met.
She's pretty busy. I can tell you that much. I know that from firsthand.
You must have had to give a very large dowry for her.
She's adorable.
Like
and
6 cows or something and some chickens.
Right.
I mean, she's amazing.
Unschooling is interesting. We don't. I think it's different to different people, and I think people hear unschooling and they get a little concerned about it because it's like, what is your kid just sit in front of a TV in their pajamas all day? It's like, no, it's not exactly. These and you might Andrew and I talk about maybe we are unschoolers because it's independent of this public school concept where get up at 6 a.m, go sit in a classroom for 7 hours a day. I would debate that unschooling is the kids are learning how to read, they're doing math, reading, writing, arithmetic, they're learning all that, but it's not in a classroom, sit down at a chair, listen to a teacher, structured setting. And so I'm actually I kind of like the unschooling concept that I've observed. And the kids are getting a lot of world experience, and I see a lot of that from a couple of unschoolers, you might say. So
yeah, I like to call it child directed. Also, so you give them an environment rich with activities and things to choose from. You definitely still have parental structure, like limited social media, limited time, on the computer.
Right.
You do use the computer as a tool, but excuse me, instead of the parent saying, here are the 5 lessons I want you to do today, and I'm going to teach them to you, it's more like the child saying, oh, I love fly fishing. For instance, my son absolutely loved fishing, and he just started picking up goose down and things he found outside, and he started making flies. Well, my dad has been a fly fisherman for years, so when he came out, he showed my son how to really do it, showed him his kit, and next thing I knew, it was like, can we go to Bass Pro Shop? And I'd take him down there, and there'd be a bunch of elderly men at this little fly tying table, and all of a sudden I'm shopping, and I look over there, and there's my 11-year-old son teaching them how to make a San Juan worm or some new fly that he had discovered. And he was on that track for, well, he's 20, he'll be 25 next month, or the next fall. He still loves to fish, and but for about a year he would deep dive into the entomology of insects and their larvae and what time of year they would be hatching at certain ponds and lakes and what kind of fish were in there. And so I covered that with him, but I didn't tell him we're going to go learn about fishing.
So can I ask you a question? Where is he now? What does he do now?
That's kind of funny. He's a musical theater major at University of Central Oklahoma.
Wait. He's actually at a university?
Yeah. Pardon me. He was highly recruited at UCO, and he has just done his 7th musical, I believe, and he's been there 2 years. He went to College of the Ozarks in Branson, which is a very highly selective group. I think they had over 3,000 applicants for only about 300 spots when he went there in 2019 . So, well,
the reason
to be successful doing
the reason why I say that, and the reason why I was snarky about it, is because so many people just seem to think that if you have, well, my kid was very similar. I mean, we were a little more structured in that they had math and writing for sure. And we sat down and we actually did that together, and they had lessons. But then
Oh, mine did too. Don't let me fool you.
well, no. And I'm sure you do. But what I wanted to dovetail into what you're saying by saying that, so my oldest son got into model building, and he started with Legos, but then he decided to go into model building. And if you go one of these days, I'll put a picture on the internet of the models that my son has made over the years, and just the amount of time. And he was into it. I mean, everything that you just said about your son and fly fishing was my kid in models. And I look back over that, and there are people out there who would go, why are you just letting him sit in his closet and build models all day? Well, that model building taught him scale, taught him math, taught him all these kinds of things. Now he's a computer programmer who just graduated college last May, making more than I have ever made in my life. So, and he was homeschooled all the way through. So
Right.
When people say things, we have propagandized parents so heavily to believe that only the state can do this job, only somebody else can do this job, or if your kid just wants to build models all day for a while, that's the worst thing ever. And we got to stop that. We've got to change this paradigm. We have to. Our kids are depending on us too.
Yeah, Andrea Andrea was homeschooled and I was public schooled, and I had, let's say, high 3.9 whatever plus GPA, and Andrea was homeschooled and finished early, and we both took the ACT and we scored about the same, and it was just enough to get into college. I mean, it was like the bare minimum to get into college for both of us, but it wasn't like the public school system provided all this extra, education that got me some high score on the ACT. Of course, we both only took it once, and once you sit through that test for all day, from what I remember, I didn't want to take it again.
Right.
But
well, I didn't mean to take over your slide presentation.
No, actually, no. That's
but I do believe that we need to get to the legislation, because it all intertwines, and we'll see that as we go.
Yeah. So then the next slide talks about our Constitution and what it states for how the compulsory education is to be provided by the government, and then the quotes is, unless other means of education are provided, which you'll always see, which we would call ourselves homeschoolers in that case, unless other means of education are provided, us, the parent, the homeschoolers. And that's a lot of the verbiage that is used in the legislature. So
and I will highlight that one of our original board members at CHIA did a deep dive into this in 1907. The word means referred to finances. Okay. A lot of times we use that word now for methods or delivery styles, but in that time period, that was the original definition. It was referring to finances.
And so then there's also highlighted between the ages of 8 and 16 for at least 3 months out of the year. And the next slide goes into the actual compulsory attendance law, which comes out of the state statutes. And that's just highlighting that the state legislature has gone beyond the Constitution of Oklahoma to say that it's unlawful for any person to prevent a child who is between the age of 5 and 18 to not go to school. And
well, back up. Back up, Robert. Back up. Back the slide up.
Michael's controlling that.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Michael. Okay, so look, between the ages of 8 and 16 years. So do we even follow the state constitution right now?
Right now.
Are we paying for our property taxes and other taxes being appropriated, or other monies being appropriated to educate children over 16?
Right, because this says 3 months out of the year, and 16 is the cap, and then our state statute, the legislature's state law is, I think it's 6 months actually I don't see it here in this state statute, but I was pretty
Yeah,
sure it was
go up, Michael.
5 to 18, and I'm pretty sure it's 6 months out of the year, but I don't see it
Okay.
highlighted in this.
Okay, so even according to this, we have a bill out right now that would lower that to age 3.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it wouldn't be compulsory at what I understand, but neither was kindergarten at the beginning.
I understand that that's been stopped, that particular bill.
But
has,
but
thank
the
God,
fact is,
but
it's been introduced, and there's people out there planning it and pushing it. And like I said before, it didn't used to be kindergarten. It was kindergarten started out as, if you want to participate, it will be available for you.
Right.
And obviously before compulsory education, prior to statehood in other states, it was that way as well. The public
but
school
government never
provided it.
expands.
Yeah.
And that's
Baby
why when
steps.
people say you don't have to take it if you don't want to, you let the rest of us take it. And I'm like, because once it gets started, it can never, it doesn't seem it's ever taken back. You can't put toothpaste back in the toothpaste bottle unless you're the factory.
Very
Well,
true.
The next slide actually goes in, the what changed, why are we here? And that was really the school choice voucher bill that passed House Bill 1934, and that offered, for those children going to a private school, it offers a $5,000 to $7,500 credit depending on your income, and then for homeschoolers, it offers $1,000 tax credit. And that's what they call like a refundable tax credit, not a non-refundable tax credit. And so, like we got highlighted here, that it's welfare. In my opinion, tax credits, subsidies, grants, it's all taking other people's money and redirecting it to an individual. And so redistribution of wealth is welfare, and it's hidden in the guise of tax credits. You get your money back, and I'll talk about that, some of that. I pay for this, I want some of my money back in a later slide. But and then we'll also comment here that it's intrusion into all forms of government, and failed in 22, and then passed. It came back around and passed in 23.
Yeah,
So,
we fought so hard in 22.
Yeah.
We stayed up praying hours out, and then we fought in 23 as well. But
and that was what I think, and that's really what brought us all together, is because there was a lot of pushback from the community and the organizations like CHIA and Homeschool Oklahoma saying don't do this, and then we were like, what Andrea and I were told, I think it was 22 or 23, I can't remember, was that this will never pass. I think it was 22, this will never pass. And then in 23 it was like, well, all the homeschoolers want this, and it's like, what are you talking about, all the homeschoolers want this? And then that's when we got kind of made this coalition, got together in this one effort to just stop, push, push back on school choice, that say, hey, this is not, everybody wants this. Because now we're hearing from some of the people in the group that they're still today hearing that nobody said anything back in 23. It's like,
I think it was I think one of the representatives, Jenny likes to call names. I usually just talk in vague, but a very influential House leader said that
right.
Nobody was up here fighting. We didn't hear anything. And I was like, I was in your office multiple times, and I bet your LA has a file, because when I went there this year twice already with the packet, they were like, oh, I already have your card, I have your packet, I still have your pen that you gave me. So
well, I guess it matters whether or not the LA is a lobbyist, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That probably does make some difference, and we can talk about that at another time. But I think Gracie makes a point here. My child goes to a private Christian school. I don't want that money because I don't want government having their finger in the school business. And I don't want to hijack your show, but I want to say one quick thing. We have done that with this. We have done this with all kinds of things. Ryan Walters passed the school board passed a rule that basically allows private schools to get, it's the State Department, the rule allows the State Department of Education to be the pass-through funder for federal funds to private schools. So if you have your kid in a private school, if they're taking any kind of state funds or federal funds, you're basically
A
in
government
this
school.
homogeneous pile that all the other government schools are that are stamping out widgets. So you
Right.
have to be the person that looks at that, because this is absolutely a fact. I've reported on it numerous times. People just like to forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you don't want the money, but somebody else in that private school is probably taking the money.
Absolutely.
And that's on record, and we'll show that through the homeschooling aspect of it. But we don't really cover. I don't usually go into the private school side of it, but it's
Right.
the same. It's the exact same things going on in the private.
Same thing.
So on this topic, I uncovered, or I found a bill yesterday that I'd never seen before, but it was by Provenzano of the House. And I think I took a note of what bill number it was. And it did pass the committee. Pardon me, I'm having trouble with my. It was the Parental Choice Tax Credit Act, prohibiting private schools from requiring the parent to participate in the parental choice tax credit. And so, as many things as we've disagreed on over the years, I actually agreed on this one.
Yeah.
It's House Bill 1396. If they're going to offer the tax credit and the school is going to become accredited so that they can issue it or receive it, then the parents were told in newsletters at multiple private schools that, this new thing is coming and we're going to have you fill it out. And it almost became part of their enrollment process.
Oh my
So
gosh.
when you enroll in our school,
Yeah.
you automatically apply for this. And when I stopped on the co-op slide a minute ago, that's kind of what I was talking about with that. I've had multiple co-op directors reach out to me saying, if an individual parent's asking for a receipt, that's slightly different than the co-op saying, hey, guess what, guys, if you fill this out, these tutors are accepting it or whatever. Yeah.
We have like hybrid. We have like a hybrid homeschool up north here in Owasso that when the credit became available, they were charging $3,000. The original charge for their 2-day-a-week hybrid homeschool was $3,000 a year. And then after the credit became available, they actively took all their families that were going to that co-op and registered them for the credit. And so they raised their fee to $7,000. And then they had the parents come in and sign over the checks to the school, and anybody that didn't get the credit, or if the money ran out, they just kind of grandfathered them in with like a grant, a scholarship or something like that.
Right.
So
but all the new families that come in won't know a difference. They won't know
exactly.
ever
Right.
a difference. They'll just assume that's the way it's always been.
Well, and that goes to, government. What does government welfare do? It jacks the cost of doing business up. And so now, while $3,000 might have been attainable for your, family, a normal family, but 7,000. It's like we looked at using our sending our son to a local co-op for some religious Greek training and stuff like that. They had kind of neat categories, and it was like, I think he wanted $2,000 a year, and it's like, well, yeah, that's doable, that's attainable. But if it was $4,000 or $5,000 or $6,000 a year, it's like, I don't know. Yeah, so. When the government gets involved, you almost have to. Everybody has to join in. And
everything that you just said to me or said to us, I can see. If anybody watches this that's in any kind of legislation, they'll say, "See, that's why we have to regulate them. See, that's why we have to write these new bills, new laws to keep some of this under wraps, under control."
Right.
And that is the opposite of liberty. It's the opposite of freedom, and it's the opposite of parents teaching their children by other means. So,
something I've seen already with some of the tax credit going into private schools. Some of these private schools, so many of the kids now have the tax credit side that now the parents that would kind of normally hold the private school a little more accountable or be a little more involved. Now they're basically said, hey, if you don't like it, hit the road, because they have such a waiting list of all these kids waiting to come in there, they can, you're going to kind of lose some of your own power within that private school because
Yep.
you were paying all the tuition. You were more of a part of that school. Now
Right.
that
Yeah.
you've got the tax credit and they've got these waiting lists, they can literally just tell you to get out.
Right. And so back in when the Epic charter school thing happened, I know Jenny's like, are we talking in circles again? Like every system that comes along, it's like a roller coaster, it's the same thing. We've had different private groups that allowed families that were using those types of funds, and all of a sudden you have a different kind of people. You have just different motivations on both sides, on the family side and on the vendor or the caregiver or the whatever it is, the education delivery person. And so it can't not change things. The installation of government funds cannot remain unaffected. The entities on both sides cannot remain unaffected.
Right. Yeah.
It's like saying you're going to put salt brine in your turkey and it will change it. There's no way around that. It will change it. I don't know why I use that.
Well, but I mean, because that's an excellent something, But it's an excellent example. You have a glass of water, and if you put even a little bit of salt in there, now all of a sudden the water is completely salty. That's actually a brilliant.
What do they say? What the government funds, the government regulates.
Right.
And you can see that. You can see that in the public school. They're passing a bill. What was it? 60% of the funding has to go to the classroom. The state is funding schools, and they have to step in and make all these laws to control the money that they're sending out to the public education system. They got bills on curriculum, what curriculum we should be teaching, all for the public school system because there's public money involved.
Yep, and
but we have to have
accountability.
Local. Oh, that's the big one. You're exactly right, Jana. That will get you every single time. Yes, of course, we want accountability, but then so often our legislature uses accountability as some kind of a shield to go out and ram these things through, and that's not what we get in the end. We don't get what they say they're trying to give us in the end. We always end up getting something different, and that's what happens when government gets involved.
Right.
Government is like that little bit of salt that you put in the water that makes the whole water salty.
It is. So when that bill failed in 2022, we knew we couldn't just sit back and take a deep breath and oh, yay, it's over, because we knew it was coming back. And it came back with the same language, but in an upfront tax credit versus a
voucher.
Yeah. With a straight up voucher. And that was part of the plan all along, from maybe not the individual legislators that were dealing with this right there on the ground, but there were definitely people and a movement nationally, internationally actually, to have universal school choice. And it's kind of like, get it done. Doesn't matter what method or what you have to call it, get it done. That's kind of what they're pushing.
And that's the thing. I was in a meeting this morning, which is the reason why I was late. And you listen to people talk, and all it is, school choice is great. I mean, we can't have nothing's going to fix anything about schools unless we have school choice. And you're like, I can't figure out, because some of these are pretty intelligent people. I mean, one of them is the head of the charter school board, who I know is a pretty intelligent person and still doesn't understand that we already have school choice. Oklahoma has plenty of school choice. We are like the top 5 in school choice. The choices are not the problem. It's the funding that's the problem. And we still can't get out of the mode that government solves all problems. No, guys, government creates the problems that it solves, and it doesn't even solve the problems. It creates problems and tries to solve them, then creates more problems, then tries to solve them. And it's just a dog chasing its tail. That's what government is, certainly in education.
Well, and when you see these bills that are called "The Money Follows the Child,"
Yes.
fund students, not systems, it's like we've successfully operated without being part of the system. Myself personally, for like I said, 23 years. And the closer that system gets into my lane, the more we notice it. And we're basically saying we're not going to go off in the ditch. We're going to keep doing what we're doing, and it's going to keep coming. And we're going to fight against it, and we're going to do our best.
Yeah, so you got to ask. Jana's brought this up. What's the intention here? Nobody's asking for this. So are we creating chaos to, get inside of something?
Absolutely, because they can't stand it that we're successful and they're not, and they want what we have, but they don't want to. The government does what the government does. It cannot teach a family how to be self-relying and have integrity. Have those the moral fortitude to step up and take care of your own responsibilities and do what God gave you those children for. He called me and my husband to raise and nurture our children according to the admonition of the Lord. That's what he called us to do. And that's why my homeschool conference that I do in the summer, the Home Education Expo, is called Freedom to Answer the Call. Because we have to recognize our freedom to answer the call. And it's not because the government says you must have a child in school up to 180 days. And I'm going to educate my children whether I'm in a system where a government says you're supposed to put your kid in school or not. It's up to me to educate my children.
So don't you
we
think
have to educate families as much as we can, and we're not going to change the ocean, but we can rescue some of the fish and teach them how to swim, free of their.
Well, don't you think the whole bottom line is we really honestly don't know what liberty is anymore? We literally don't know what freedom is. We think freedom is being able to watch a movie if we want or go to a basketball game. We don't understand really what freedom is. And I think that's how we get caught. I think most of our lawmakers don't understand what freedom is.
Well, anybody that pulls up the state statutes and what is it, 13,000, 8.5 by 11 pages of 12-point font text on how the state governs you.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sound very free to me.
Well, let's see what we have on the next one up there, Michael.
Okay.
Yeah, this is showing this is the highlight here on the I guess that'd be the left side. That's from the state statute that's showing the paragraph where the homeschoolers get the credit, and that's kind of how legislation is written. It doesn't, if you go down to paragraph I-1 in the state statute, it refers to this tax commission auditing qualified expenses that were listed in paragraph 2C. So it doesn't say, hey, we're here to audit homeschoolers. It wouldn't say that explicitly. It always refers back to the paragraph where the money was given out and the group was explicitly called out. And then over on the right side is the actual tax form that came out this year, new for 2020. When you file your 2024 taxes, you're going to see one form is for the private school parental choice tax credit, because those were all issued in advance, but the homeschoolers got the tax credit that on when they file their taxes for 2024. And this is the form that shows the expense type, the vendor, and description, date of purchase, and the amount you spent. And you can list as many receipts that you want, up to $1,000 per child.
So this form right here, and this is what I was telling everybody when we were fighting against this. Well, you don't have to take it if you don't want to. And I said, yeah, but your average everyday person who's going to go to TurboTax and pull this up and see that on their, they'll be like, oh, I didn't know we could get a tax. And then they'll fill it out because that's what they've been taught to do.
Or their CPA will ask them.
Or the CPA will do it.
Exactly.
I had a person contact me this past week and said, what do I do? The CPA filled it out and I didn't want to. I said, how could they fill it out if you didn't bring the receipts? Like, you have to have receipts. And so Here's
Ooh,
my
Jana, are they a
here's
friend anymore?
here are some of my questions. At what point if you're a co-op and you're helping other families by teaching them how to crochet or something, and there's very little money exchanged other than maybe we're sharing the cost of our location or our materials or something like that. I do not want my name or my, I don't want anything that I'm
Oh, I see.
associated with put on there, because over here, well, you can't see me, but I'm pointing at the thing. Over here, it says that the expense itself will be audited. So it looks like
And the vendor and the vendor is
right? So
listed.
it
The
looks like
vendor's
it's
listed on there.
right. And so it looks like it's taking the family
Wow.
kind of back out of the responsibility side of it. You can list anything you want, but then when we audit it, we're going to audit your receipts, your
Well, and
expenses.
generally, I'll tell you one thing. They go after the deeper pockets. Generally, it's generally the vendor that is probably going to get in trouble, and I can tell you that from like farming side. They don't, there's if you have a farm tax deduction, they'll charge you if you misuse that card. The state can fine you twice what the taxes were. But what they end up doing is they go, and I found this out at a diesel shop. They said that they go after you under like the corporate fraud. They'll go after companies using the corporate fraud state statutes, which is like $10,000 per a situation. So, why would the state come after me because I use my tax exemption card and they can charge me, $10 because it was a $5 charge, when they can, why go after me when they can go after the corporation who took my farm tax card as a and fine them $10,000 for misuse of that, accepting that card fraudulently. So that's kind of the vendors are because of this, listing your vendor. If those are fraudulent charges, say like I've used the example of going to Lowe's and buying $500 in educational power tools. So because
You're
anyway,
building a bookshelf.
sure,
Come
yeah.
on.
I mean, well, and that's
Well,
that's my concern
and
is that when this stuff starts hitting the news, and that could seem like a practical expense, but what do they say? Perception
and
is
it has,
reality.
right. And it has, we did not bring slides today or articles, but I know Robert has a spreadsheet of all the articles I've been sending him. And I'm pretty sure Jenny has some too, probably Michael too. But in Arizona, they've had all kinds of lawsuits, people buying Christmas trees. Well, when I taught public school, I did a whole unit on Christmas around the world, and we did our geography lesson. We used a Christmas tree and we made ornaments from all different cultures and countries. And so I could see why a family might say, well, we did do a Christmas unit and a winter unit or whatever, and we bought. But go back to what we were talking about with unschooling. We're not a school like the public school. So I can't just turn in certain receipts. It's like the way I school, our muffin baking, our bread baking, our crochet, like we do all kinds of things. We experience life. We go to museums, we go to car shows, we go to medieval fair. We do all kinds of stuff that's educational. And of course, I would never use the tax credit anyway, but I wouldn't turn those things in if I
The
did.
chaos. They create that chaos. Once
Right.
it starts hitting the news, and the news is all too happy to, if it bleeds, it leads. Run
Right.
something, an ad like a headline like that.
And then they have to define it. And we watched this happen with Epic Charter Schools. We had a lot of receipts that ended up saying, they said, well, you can't use your money on that. But at the beginning, they could, oh, we can spend it. We can buy whatever, we can buy this curriculum. It can be religious. We can buy. It was basically like Obamacare. If you like your XYZ,
oh yeah, if you like your
if you like your co-op, you can keep your co-op. If you like your Christian Science curriculum, you can keep your Christian Science curriculum until you couldn't. So,
and Obamacare caused my doctor to quit, so I didn't get to keep my doctor. Yeah. He went independent.
Exactly. I knew people that would buy. They were in a Christian class and they loved it, and for science or whatever, Bible. And when they joined Epic, they would have Epic buy their curriculum because they had to choose math, reading, science, history. They had to choose like a comprehensive education. but it stayed in the shrink wrap because the individual teacher said, oh, you're already doing math on your own and you enjoy it, you like it, and it's working for you. So you can keep doing whatever the math is you're doing. You're getting a good grade. Your kids are getting a good grade. But I'm sorry, but your learning fund won't pay for that. But we have to show that you purchased math curriculum with your learning fund or whatever. I mean, I don't remember all the details, but that's the concept. And so over time, that got regulated and regulated and regulated. And so.
Well, and you know what struck me when you guys were talking about that was, so many. I mean, I think the group is growing, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I believe that the group of government stay the heck away from me is actually growing. And I think that some of the people maybe who are providing homeschool services, Jana, like you said, because I know there were people who would teach crochet classes, right? I wonder if they realize that they get listed as a vendor on this form, if they're actually getting paid and that homeschool family takes a credit. I wonder if they realize they're getting sucked into this. So it's not just the family that's getting sucked into the government control. It's the vendor that's getting sucked into the government control as well. So,
right. And I know I mentioned this on a previous interview that we did, but I'm going to highlight it right here. There was legislation that was suggested. In fact, I think if we get to that list this year, it was reintroduced for the Tim Tebow type thing where public schools can allow homeschoolers to come to the school for like football or band or choir or, this what made me think of it, or even take a science class if they really liked it. And when I looked at this voucher bill that in the one that failed in 22, but the language was almost identical in the tax credit. In there, it says who can be a vendor, who can receive this funding, and it listed a public school. Yeah. So a public school, a charter school, but
it says that in this current. It also says that in the current one.
Right. So the goal here, let's just get to it. The goal and the agenda is that you can smorgasbord your education and you can still use government funds. So whether you call yourself a homeschooler or a hybrid schooler or what all these new terms that they're coming up with, by the way, which is another issue, is that you can take the tax credit, the educational savings account, the voucher, whatever they're going to call it, because it is morphing. And the goal would be that you can go back and take, Mr. Smith's shop class at the local public school because you really, really liked it, or even biology. But then the rest of the time you can use your money shopping around. Let's say you have an engineer in town that wants to help you learn engineering or whatever it is. You can just smorgasbord it out, and it takes away, that's why they call the decentralization of education. So this is coming from the UN and
it's funny, just when we've talked about this for probably 3 or 4 years together. And for some reason, it just struck me why the schools would want to participate in that Tim Tebow thing. They get their panties all in a wad because homeschoolers they can't count a homeschooler as a butt in a seat, right? And that's the way they get paid. Generally, their appropriations are for butts and seats.
Right.
So that's how you get a butt in a seat, right? Is you hold out a carrot and you go, hey, our coach is great. You come here and do. Yeah. So
that's another reason the ESAs won't work. But as soon as you highlight that to them and explain to them that it won't work, they'll try to come up with a new funding method or a new way to get around that. So, part of me is like, we need to educate and shine a light on these things to people that are trying to do these things. But like I said, once they become aware of it, they either, and they agree with you and they start fighting against it, or they try to come up with another way around.
Yeah, and with
the
talk of ending the income tax,
which isn't going to happen, I don't think, this year. But go ahead.
Well, it may not happen this year, but one would think, well, what's going to happen to these tax credits? They may go away, but we're starting to, and later in this slide, there's the Dusty Devers bills, which was
Oh.
putting out ESA
Well,
concept.
go ahead, because
But
that's what
I
I
got
was talking about.
okay. I guess maybe real quick, these next two slides are just some talking points that I hear a lot from individuals, and it's always it's my money and I want some back. I hear that a lot of the time, and we always say, hey, every taxpayer in Oklahoma pays for public schooling, whether you have kids or not. Visitors to the state, anybody that's paying a tax, whether it be property taxes, sales tax, local taxes, and then even the federal government. And I put some statistics on here that I also listed the sources at the bottom, but it's actually kind of complex how schools are funded, because it does vary widely. The rural schools seem to cost more per a student when you break it down like that, and the city schools cost less, which I mean that stands to reason. But if you look at some how the funding breaks down, you know, in a Okmulgee, 54% is actually provided by the state, you know, through the income tax collection, and 30% would be local, and I believe that's your you know, bonds, and I think mostly bonds, I think is where the low. I didn't get that deep into the funding, and then of course 16% for the Fed. I don't know how they figure these breakdowns. I don't know how they decide how the federal government could send more money to Okmulgee versus Tulsa. But
It
then you go
has
look.
to it has to do, I can tell you that
Okay.
actually. It has to do with how many students are on free and reduced
Okay.
lunch, because
All right.
don't forget all of this was the war on the poor, that started, you know, years and years ago, but that oh gosh, LBJ,
Yeah.
right, was the
Right.
one who instituted the war on the poor and screwed the whole country up
Right.
for
Yep.
everybody. And that's where that comes from. The more poor, whatever they're classifying as poor, because don't forget, it's a sliding scale. It can be whatever they want. So whatever is classified as poor is based on numbers of free and reduced lunches that are given out, even though they pretty much give those out to everybody now. And
Right,
that's how those funds are decided. And they usually, rural schools have a higher population of that.
So this is just pointing out the fact that, hey, it's everybody's money. You know, let's, if we want to talk about getting your money back from the government, let's not be like plebes and go beg the government for our money back through a tax credit. Let's give everybody a tax cut, and that's always been my stance.
Right.
And then
Well, don't give it to them in the first place.
Mine too. My thing is, I always told people, like, there are other ways to get involved. There are other ways to get involved to control what's happening in the schools, or affect what's happening in the schools, or to affect what's happening with your taxes. Like trying to get this little $1,000 back and put it on the backs of those of us who have chosen not to be a part of the system for years is
Right.
not the way to stick it to the man or to get your taxes back. And you know, it's good to point out here that a lot of these legislators, these ideas aren't necessarily coming straight from them. I'm not going to say no legislator has ever had a good idea. Like I respect a lot of them for having good ideas, but a lot of these things are taking place in like a think tank environment where people get together and they're paid big bucks to get a bunch of. I'm sure they're very smart, nice people, individuals. I know some, but they get together in these groups and they just try to come up with strategies and ideas and how can we fix things, and then they bring those ideas to the table. And
don't forget, those think tanks are always funded by somebody.
Exactly.
And that somebody has an agenda, or they wouldn't be doling out that cash.
Right.
Yeah.
So whose agenda do we really have? Is it the people's agenda, or is it a certain people's agenda?
Absolutely. And Jenny and I, she's done many podcasts on that type of thing. So
yeah, it's not in this slide. We've had it in this slide in the past, but like American for Prosperities, which is a Koch funded organization, push for school choice, you know, this multi-state school choice agenda, and then
choice,
Walton's,
big one.
the Walton family and the Koch family, they have opened up. I think I read an article in Arkansas that 50% of the school choice recipient schools, private schools, were Walton, backed private schools. But I tend to stay to the homeschooling side of it and not even though that's really what's going on when you look at it.
Yeah.
It's exploiting.
We should get to the data collection too, because that's a big part of it. It's like they want data on every child, and that, I used to say, I still do, but when they say the money follows the child, I mean, that just gives me the creeps. I don't know how anybody can say that with a
Right.
straight face.
Why do
It's
you
like-
want government following your child?
Yeah, and why do you want anybody's money following your child? I mean, that just sounds like,
Well,
There's a bill at the end of this slide that actually really is an interesting follow the child legislation that they're pushing through right now.
yeah. And also, if you put your money in a pot together with other people, let's say you donate even at your church or something, are you supposed to go back to the board of the church and say, oh, my little Johnny wants to go to this $15,000 camp? Can I have some of that money that we all pitched in to run our church or whatever to send my child? It's just not, it's not how things work. Now, if there's a designated fund that comes in, that someone who donated it, put, this is for a building fund or something like that, that's different. But
yeah, well, I'll tell you how most parents that I talked to during that whole time with the money follow the child, their thinking on that was literally not that the government's going to follow them like we would think, that how that process would go. Their literal reasoning was just, hey, that money's allocated to my child. It's going into a public school. I want to allocate it over here, and that's it. That was their sole, thought process in that, is that money's for my child. I should be able to say where it's going to go, and that was the end of it.
But if your child has never been in public school, there was never any money allocated for them to begin with. So that's the butts in the seats argument, Jenny, because like if all the homeschool families went and enrolled their child at the same time right now, they wouldn't have anywhere to put them. They've never calculated that fund. And that's why they want to do data collection. How much money are we missing out on? How many of those kids
Right, yeah.
could be getting an upfront money? We should make them file so that they can we could get the upfront money. And then if they choose not to use the system, then at least we got money for their head.
And that's on the next slide, and the notification system when you fill out the tax credit, and this is a screenshot of the.
I wish you could make that bigger.
Well, there's not. This is a little beyond the scope, but what I've got here is some screenshots from 2023 tax credits that were collected by the state. This is all public information. It's all kept on data.gov, and I can.
Will you send that to me so I can put it in the write up that I'll do of this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. But there's since this is from 2023, since not all the 2024, and it won't be for a while till we see 2024 data, but I'll be able to go in there and find everybody that took the homeschool tax credit. I'll know your name, and I'll be able to look you up, and it'll be public information, and it'll be the government's information. I can go into this system right now and tell you, like aerospace, there's an aerospace engineering tax credit. I can find every aerospace engineer in Oklahoma that took the tax credit in 2023, and kind of creepy, since it's a non-refundable tax credit, I can divide your tax credit that you got by 4.5%. I can tell you how much you made last year, and so here's the point. The notification to the state is like the number one tenet of homeschool freedom. You go to HSLDA's website, and right at the top is, does this state make you notify that you're a homeschooler? And I think you would see a lot of homeschoolers fight to the death against the notification system. But if I take all your all's money and dish it out at $1,000 a time, all of a sudden people don't have that argument anymore. They're like, yeah, sure, I want $1,000. I'm going to sign up with the government. It's like, dang, something that you would have probably died on a hill for free, $1,000. You just gave away all your
Well,
cards.
that's why we save the shekels for shackles. I mean, you know.
Yeah. So
Oh.
anyway, that's from that you can search data.gov and you can and the link's actually at the link to the 2023 is actually at the bottom of the slide. But that's kind of
So
what I'm.
didn't the public schools issue or the private schools issue
Well, I don't
upfront
think it
tax
would be on
credit?
2020. It's not on 2023, and since it's not, I don't know how that's going to work for private schools since they received money in advance. And the families are getting 1099s. I don't know how that's going to look. I'm sure it'll show up because it is in like your tax programs, your tax software. Like I do my own taxes. I use TurboTax. I've done it for 20 years or whatever. And when I noticed the first time when I hit the first slide for state credits, right at the top was, did you get a check from the government for the parental choice tax credit? That was, and I didn't even look into that one. And then on the very next slide or the next questionnaire was right at the very top. Did you have any homeschooling expenses for 2024? And that was the first time
And
I'd
the way
seen it.
the way that's worded is very inviting.
Oh yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
yeah, I bought a new computer. I bought,
Sure. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I just found that I just thought that was so interesting because the notifying the state.
Interesting.
Well,
Let's interesting, or I might insert another.
Well, it's just yeah, I know.
Alarming, horrific.
Alarming.
I would go with alarming. That's not a curse
Egregious.
word.
Maybe ironic. It's ironic that it's like when Andrew and I were interviewed by Channel 6 News, and when Amanda Swope was running her bill to have DHS investigate you every 6 months and sign it, the Channel 6 didn't even know what the bill read. We hadn't even seen the bill, and Channel 6 sat down with us and said, "What's the big deal about a note?" They presented it to us as a notification system to the government, and they asked Andrew and I, what's the big deal if you have to notify the government? And of course, my argument is always like, well, that's just baby steps. That's just the first step to get the data on you. And liberty, I always say liberty is lost in baby steps. And of course, a month later, the bill came out, and it was egregious. But here we are. We have a notification system in Oklahoma. Basically.
And people willingly. See, I've said all along, this is just a carrot. If you dangle it in front of their face, and then this sneaky stuff where like it just shows up on your TurboTax, like you didn't click, do you want to take tax credit? And then it says, did you have homeschool expenses? Like it just says it right up there, like this question. I know it's simplifying it for people, but
see, this is, so I'm going to stop right here. Why should we notify the government about anything we do? And I guess that's my bottom line. And I so appreciate Lisa and Julie and everybody else who understand, you guys who understand the concept of freedom. And it's beyond frustrating to me that it would somehow even be okay to have to give the government any of my personal information, or that the government should know anything about what I do in my personal life. None of that is okay. How have we gotten to the point where we somehow refer to or defer to government as, well, we probably better have government do that, or what's the matter with government doing blah, blah, blah. And, and you're just like, how do you even, how did government become a term that everybody is okay with? Government is a 4-letter word.
Well, and the other thing that makes it a little bit, for me, that opened my eyes a little more on it was the fact that Robert could get in there and look at it. Like, it's not just the government. Now this is public record.
Jiminy Christmas.
Well, they may hide it now that I found it. It may go somewhere else. That's what I was concerned about.
Well, nevertheless, the government isn't just this big beast. It's people.
All right.
And there are workers that make whatever X amount of dollars, either salaried or by the hour, that are sitting there dealing with all this data too. So
Jenny will probably cover this later, but that giant slice of the pie, that's not individuals. That's corporate dollars. that's credit. That's credits going to corporations, mainly for green energy, by the way. But
Yeah,
Oh,
I definitely need that. Oh yeah, I mean, if you guys saw my latest video where I refute the fact that Governor Stitt has any notion or clue at all about what free enterprise is, I covered that pretty well in there.
Right.
Yeah. Enough with the subsidies, for Pete's
Right.
sakes.
What's
Well,
on the next?
and another note on this on the whole notification deal, if you just put it in like
Golly.
the ethos of a corporation or a business, you think the boss is going to want to have to report downwards to, the people that are working for him, about all the little things that he says and does? I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, we've gone reverse where everybody thinks we work for the government instead of the government working for us. I mean, it's just opposite world.
I've
and
lost
people don't,
my
back to
note.
the point about, people, I don't know, people, I don't know, I guess we've been conditioned to just take our credits and go. So, required reading in our household is Animal Farm in 1984. So
Yeah.
I don't
Brave
think
New
a lot of-
World.
Yeah, we haven't quite got. We're not so sure about that one. We're there for our 14-year-old. Maybe when it was thinking
Yeah,
about maybe
Brave
when he
New
was
World,
16
yeah.
or 17.
Brave New World
It
is
can-
very distressing.
So,
It is.
But yeah, well, that's gonna be one we let our son read probably around 16, or at least
Right.
give it to him to read 16 or 17. But
Well, one other note on what you said, Jenny, how we got here, that I want to say that you and I have talked about many times. The government has literally just made themselves the expert in the room on everything in one way or another. They've made themselves the authority, so we just succumb to their expertness or their authority or whatever. And I hate that we live in that kind of society, but that's literally how we've gotten here. We just allow them to be the expert instead of us doing a little research or working or being responsible. We've just allowed them to tell us.
And I'm afraid there's a large group of people that run to the government every time they have a problem.
Yeah.
And look for solutions and beat them up. And if they don't solve their problem, they're going to get primaried or something like that. And I think that's, in my opinion, like this bullying database. Bullying is the big problem in the school system now. Now we got to make a bullying database to go report on your neighbor.
We already have that, by the way.
Yeah, I've seen
Julia
it.
can tell. In my article, my new recent article on the SLDS, I actually pulled in a PDF of a bunch of that stuff, and the stuff that they collect on the data that they collect on your kids. I'm thinking about doing a live at 1:00 and running through that, because I don't think people are getting how much data they're collecting on your kids in public school, which is part of the reason why none of us want our kids to be in that system. It's like you don't want them collecting all this data.
And data is easily manipulated. Data is used how you want to use it. I mean, you make the results fit your narrative.
Absolutely,
when you get to
100%.
It's so easy. I that's my job. That's part of my job, is taking data and using it to get funding for projects, for modifications and whatnot. And anybody that's in the sciences field that deals with data, they're the first ones that are like, don't trust the science, because don't trust the data, because the data's been manipulated.
I had to take a statistics class. I had to take one as an undergrad and one in my master's program. And you know what? I despised that class because I'm not a numbers person. I'm an observational person, pretty obviously. But the one thing that I really did learn from both of those classes, I can make data say whatever I want.
Yeah.
What's the saying?
I'll just massage it a little bit, put this light on it.
And just like two things. One is when I was in an education major. So when I was in school, they taught us, statistics and education. And they talked about, how you can still, like, even if your whole class flunks something, how you can still give a weighted grade, or you can still give everybody that got a 50 a C, and then give everybody who got a 58 or a 60 a B instead of it being raw data, raw scoring.
Right.
And then also in Tennessee, and then I believe there's another one in another state. There's a student suing the public school because they got a 3.4 and they cannot read or even write their name. But yet they graduated from public school with a 3.
You're right.
Yeah. And I think
That
there's
was Alabama.
There's another state too. I know there's one in Tennessee, and is it Alabama, the other one?
I think it's Alabama.
And so, yeah, their data obviously was manipulated somewhere down the road or whatever they're grading their child on.
Well, Lisa said it literally begins in utero, the data collection thing. They ask questions. The questions they ask pregnant and laboring women are incredibly disturbing, and it doesn't even end when the baby's born or at the peds office or at school. And I'll never forget our youngest daughter. I had to think about that a second. Our youngest daughter had had to go to the hospital for an emergency operation for her appendix, and during the time that she was in the hospital, they were getting her ready for surgery. And the nurse comes in and she's like, well, I just need you to answer a few questions. And mind you, my husband and I are in the room. She's talking to Betty. Do you guys have any guns in your house? And Betty looked at me and I was like, and I turned around and I said, you're asking a 14-year-old what? For what reason? Yeah, these people are crazy. I don't know what is the matter. I no idea.
Yeah, and they asked that at a urgent care that I went to with mine. Of course, I'm filling the form out, and in their intake, it asked all kinds of questions. Do you feel safe? Do your parents have weapons in the house? Do you know where they are? Just intrusive.
But see, here's the thing. You go, no, or you just don't answer. You just completely scratch through it. I've done that before. Just completely scratch through things on, questionnaires and gone,
yeah, or if you're one of my
business.
Yeah, if you're one of mine, you're like, I just got a 22. You want to go hunting with me? Whatever.
Okay, do you have another slide?
Well, we probably should let's skip 2024 legislative bills and go to 2025 because a lot of them just repeated, and I already talked about Swope's bill, so I resigned, so we didn't get another bill like that from her. But these were some of the bills that I highlighted that we found just through searching Legiscan, and then what I felt was a pretty good push in the right direction was my representative Banning authored a bill that we were working on to remove homeschoolers from the tax credit, and that was HB 1519.
That didn't get a hearing, though, did it?
It did not. It went to the finance subcommittee, appropriations and budget. But from just working on getting that out there, and now we have language that we can use that's been reviewed by the state's House legal team. It's nice to have that, and we can use it next year.
No, fair enough. Yeah.
And that was, in my opinion, that I was pretty. I mean, obviously you want it to go all the way through, but the word we were getting is they want the data. They want the data from 2024 to see how we're going to move forward with this, this particular bill.
And it's unfortunate because we cannot educate every family who's going to open that TurboTax and see that form and go to their accountant. And we can't stop the masses from doing what the government tells it to do. I mean,
and it was a real eye opener for me because it was moving around. It went to the Rules Committee, and then it got pulled out of the Rules Committee, went to the Finance Committee, and we were jumping around trying to find out, and it happens so fast.
Yeah,
it's like you have 1 week. Once it hits the committee, I mean, you almost have 1 week to barrage all the legislators and try to get them to hear the bill.
Right.
So,
hey, Robert, do you know where any of these stand? And one question
I did.
Looked up last night. I think the deadline to pass first committee is tomorrow, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I think actually, all these bills, I actually wrote it on a different sheet, but from the bills that I had looked at, I know Dusty Devers pulled his
Yeah.
ESA
thank goodness.
bill. I know the Kane did not make a committee. It did not get heard in committee. Strom's didn't get heard in committee, and Waldron's didn't get heard in committee. And then these three down at the bottom, they didn't get heard either, but they were basically the same bill from three different legislators, read the same way. I always thought that was kind of interesting. Had this similar verbiage, and it was basically differentiating the data that Oklahoma Tax Commission collects between private and homeschoolers. So more data collection, but those are what those bills were. Yeah, as far as I saw, I just checked these this morning, and I know the Tim Tebow bill did not get heard as of this morning, and neither did Strom's. Strom's was he's ran this one last year and again this year, testing for those that take the tax credit.
And that always cracks me up because that's the first thing that they do. And remember, they did that in Arizona, and that caused all kinds of problems. I mean, all we need to do is just look to Arizona and not do what they do. But then
Right.
I think we've had, I don't know why.
Well, and they don't even have testing sites set up that if all, like, this is just for the people who took the tax credit. But even so, where are they going to go? Like, especially if you're in a rural area or, so
Yeah.
Are there
because-
any other ones?
These were the main ones that there was a lot of bills, but I didn't hit some of the ones that were just like increased low. There was bills that lowered the ACT ratings for taking it, affected homeschoolers and public schoolers, and I just was watching those, and some of those did pass committee. More grants, lowering the testing requirements for students to be
So on
qualified
that
for
one,
grants.
Rick West has ran that 3 years in a row, 4 years, and I happened to be in his office when he was about to go argue that one, and so I went with him to committee. And it's an equity, not equality type thing. It's not equity like they're saying, but basically, homeschoolers have to take ACT and make a certain score to get the Oklahoma Promise, even if they've already been admitted to college. Public school, you do not, and then private school also has to take. They have to get a 22 on the ACT.
That sounds like picking winners and losers to me.
Yeah, and so that's just for the Oklahoma Promise, which was designed to help the students who need it the most have an edge on getting into college or paying for their college. So, that one's been around for a while, and I do believe it made it. I watched it pass committee the first time, but I'm not sure where it's at right at the moment. I need to talk to Rick West about that. So
I don't know. I feel like I was pretty poor. I put myself through college, so I don't really have much sympathy for grants and getting through college. I paid through it the whole way, so it's just my opinion.
yeah.
Well, we made our kids do the same thing, and I can't tell you the number of times that my youngest one has said, "I'm not taking that. I don't want to have to pay for that."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I get it. I totally get it.
Well, we need to see college also as our investment. We're buying it. So, the Oklahoma Promise is definitely redistribution of wealth. That's what Robert's talking about.
Yeah.
I had to pay the full amount to go to college.
Yeah.
Made 3 payments to OSU every semester. Man, they were big payments too when you're living on your own, making $10 an hour, whatever.
Oh,
I made back then.
Yeah, but I think that's another. But think about it. One of the ways that anybody has control over you, and I'm not just talking about the government, but obviously the government is a big thing here. Anybody has control over people who are in debt.
Right.
Anybody
it's biblical, right, Jenny?
Absolutely, 100% it is.
Yeah, the borrower is enslaved to the lender. So.
Absolutely, because anytime you owe somebody else, that somebody else can pull the rug right underneath your feet or threaten you or extort you or anything else. You're always in a ditch, compared to the people that you owe. So how do you control a whole nation of young people? And that's by convincing everybody that they have to go to college. And then when you get them into college, you collect all of this data on the FAFSA. And then after you do that, you assure them that they need to have underwater basket weaving for 5,000. And then and that's what they're going to end up doing or women's studies. I just love that. So you're going to go get a master's degree in women's studies that's going to cost you $150,000. So when you get out, you're still cooking fries at McDonald's, but now you have to pay the federal government or its subsidiary, whoever gave you that loan, for the $150,000. So it's absolutely the world's worst system for creating freedom ever.
Right. And it's a monopoly. Certain people get all the contracts, or they become the vendor that's approved. And that's why we're fighting this so much, coming over into the private school and the home education lane, because the only way to remain truly free is do it yourself, pay for it yourself, be responsible for it yourself.
But I don't know how we sell that. I mean, we've come to the part now in our society where all four of us can say that, because all four of us believe that. But if we try to tell other people, they don't want that. They don't want to have responsibility. They don't want to have to deal with their own issues. They just don't want to. Yeah. And so how do you can't legislate change. I mean, you can't legislate morality. You can't legislate any of this stuff. I guess all you do is just pray that these people will open their eyes.
Yeah, prayer and one or two people at a time, whoever the Lord puts in your path today, how are you going to influence them and impact them for the kingdom? Because that's important. And that's why I tell people all the time, you cannot create these micro schools, pod schools, co-ops, or whatever from the top down. The only reason they were ever effective to begin with is because it came functionally and meaningfully, organically from the need. And, that's why people always talk about grassroots being so powerful. But as soon as it grows and mushrooms and turns into something it's not originally designed to be, and it's no longer effective. And so you have to keep the main thing. And the Lord's been dealing with me, like it starts at home, and you have to keep it there. You have to keep it happening within yourself by following what you're called to do before you can let it help other people.
Well, and you have to encourage, and I'll even add to that, you have to encourage the people that are already doing it, because it's a tough slog. I mean, right now, taxes are crazy, inflation is crazy. Trying to do anything on your own is a slog. It's hard.
Well, and when I say on your own, and when I say build
people up,
you can come alongside other people, and they're not alone. I didn't mean it that way, but they recognize their responsibility for themselves and their family. And then you have others that come alongside each other and you help, but not because the government told you to, or not because, basically we're talking about the church, the true church of Jesus Christ, it's how the church operates too, right?
Absolutely. And, we don't talk about, we don't start the podcast with a prayer or end it, or, we don't do any of that. But we try to stick to topics that are biblical, and self-responsibility is biblical. Right. It's absolutely 100% biblical. And we've just got to get people back to the knowledge that you're safer when you are responsible for yourself and your actions, and you're under God's law, and that's what you're doing, and that's to whom you're responsible. Right. So, because then that's where your help comes from. Your help comes from the Lord. It does not come from the government.
Right. And when we look at that constitutional law that they say allows us to homeschool, quote, by other means, I always say, they're recognizing a right that God already gave us.
Yes.
It was not the man who said, or the men who wrote that, who said, oh, let's give these people the right, or exactly, it was Mr. Buchanan. His wife was already doing it, and he was like, how are we going to handle people like ourselves? There's not a public school within walking distance back then, and my wife does a great job at home. We don't want this compulsory law to affect us. And so that's why they came up with, unless other means of education are being provided. But I would argue the fact that just like our declaration, it's because God gave us that right.
Right.
And these men were smart enough to recognize it.
That's
And
right.
so they're not giving us the right to do it. They're just recognizing that we already have the right to.
Amen. So I'm going to put this comment in. Lisa brought this up quite a bit earlier. She says, and she makes clear, but even atheists and non-Christians can and should homeschool. We just want to put that out there. Homeschooling is not a Christian only idea. And
Absolutely. I mean, even though I subscribe to God gave us those rights from the beginning, he gave them to everybody.
Yeah, we definitely interact with a lot of families that I don't know, I would say not maybe I don't know if I'd call them non-Christian, but definitely, not, or I wouldn't call them atheists, but they're definitely non-Christians. And we see a lot of those in homeschooling communities. What are they, secular, or what? I think they are like secular
secular
homeschoolers or something like
Right.
that is what you'll see them comment online, looking for a secular homeschooling group. So there's a lot of them out there.
Right.
For
Well, we
sure.
fight for those freedoms for everybody.
Yeah.
When Constitutional Home Educators Alliance was founded, it was like that was one of the things we stated. My driving principles might be because I believe God's called me to do this, but the benefit is for everyone. The fruit of that is for everyone.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So.
And Lisa makes another good point.
Yeah.
How many of the folks who create these freedom killing bills have actually traditionally homeschooled? And that's another good,
some of them actually have, to be honest.
really?
Some of them actually have.
That was a conversation with Devers. Why are you creating this $6,000 ESA bill for homeschoolers? Did you see a need for money when you were homeschooling your kids? A lot of these are homeschooling, and they'll use that as justification. It's like, well, I don't agree with you.
I still need to have a conversation. I really enjoy visiting with him, and we have a lot of things that we agree on, and so I look forward to that conversation. We haven't had a chance to have it yet, but yeah. So.
And same with what was Warren Hamilton? He's a homeschooler too, but he's a big school choice supporter.
Yeah, and that one I still don't understand, and so many of us have tried to talk to.
How did all these people make it without welfare?
And Shane Jett,
for welfare.
I think they look at it as it's not for me, it's for them. I'm not doing it because it's my experience. I'm doing it so that those who don't have the experience I have can have the experience.
But wasn't that LBJ's thought process?
Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, that's what I've heard from other people. I didn't mean that to say I was quoting Shane Jett. That was a separate comment. Different people that I've talked to who homeschool feel like they have an obligation to help in some way. And just like we talked about, they have that's their job. They're up there to help make a change or make that happen. So
I know we're way over now. I'm probably
well, it's okay. Go ahead. I mean,
okay, because there's these two bills, and I just threw those in at the last minute, and they're not. Well, the Sifry's bill was kind of interesting. That Homeschool Oklahoma brought that to my attention first, and I got to reading it, and I thought, what in the world is this? And I just put that in there as an example of why homeschoolers, shouldn't want to, co-parent with the government. I mean, this is the system they're creating. They're creating, if you go read this bill, SB 224, which did pass committee 8-1, Guthrie from Bixby was the only senator that voted no in that committee. But it's a new law. It's establishing a database for children that go to school. It's a cradle to grave system that uses, and somewhere in that screen clip, it uses AI learning to, in my opinion, I mean, you read it and you come to your own conclusion, but I see this as, AI is deciding based on the data that's inputted into this system. AI will determine your fate. in the future. Go read it and you tell me. But this is not what I want my kids to be part of.
No, it reminds me of the Lego movie where the little guy gets up every day, ding, your alarm goes off, your coffee's ready, you drink it. It's like everything's on a robotic system.
Well, but this is the one that this bill right here, 224, it's supposed to be heard in appropriations today. And I don't think we've got any friends on there but one. And I've spoken to her about this bill. But the biggest problem that we have is we already have this. And so that was the article that I wrote that I'll probably go ahead and do a live on at 1, so I can just try to get it out there so people understand what we're doing, because Julia and Lynn and I fought this state longitudinal database from the beginning. I mean, from when we found it. And part of the reason why I quit and actually started working in my local municipal government and got away from the Capitol for a while is because of the fact that we had a bill that we had a representative work on us. So for 4 years, we had a bill that Jason Nelson, who was helping us work on this bill to stop this state longitudinal database, and we had it worded one way, and the next thing I knew, he was having a meeting with the state database guy, and then the next thing we knew, it wasn't anything like we had written, and it was basically, okay, we're going to have this state longitudinal database, but at least we'll show you all the data points that we're taking.
And whose idea is this? Because
this was Obama's.
But I mean, when you look at Sifrid's campaign website, she wasn't running on creating a database system for education. That was I'm pro-gun, I'm pro-life.
Dusty Devers didn't run on anything education.
Exactly, there was nothing about ESAs and Dusty Devers campaign website.
And I helped with the campaign, so he's out here by us.
Where is this coming from?
I have some pretty strong ideas on that, but that's a whole nother.
And Andrea. Right. Yes. As a matter of fact, the data collection came originally from Jana Belcher, who was the first so-called conservative Republican elected to be the state superintendent. She was in 2010, and basically all the OSDE did under Jana Belcher was implement all of President Obama's educational changes, the 4 pillars of Obama's educational system. And that's why we have a lot of what we have today in Obama's race to the bottom, because we wanted to get race to the top funds. Right. It was all about getting federal funds.
All of those things are part of our generational experiences. But when we look at our website, we have people that did this, back before that even. Right. And the longitudinal database has been being pushed. Yes. I don't know the names of the individual people, but it's been being pushed since way before that. Yeah. As well. Yeah. So there's different players all along the track that have been.
Well, because it's a global goal. You have to track people to know what they're doing, because the only way you can control individuals made by God is to put them in an unholy tracking system so that you can know everything about them.
And completely strip their parental involvement. You'll have no say in your child's future, because the database will tell you your child's future.
Exactly. It'll tell you what workforce, what things that they need to do. What classes do you need to get your kids in so that they can be this or be that or whatever, when it's not anything about, I didn't know that, really. Took a trip to Shine. That's interesting. Huh? Interesting. And it's true. Different players, same game. Absolutely.
Right. And it's just an agenda and a push that different people play different parts in all along the path.
Yep. Absolutely. So. All right. Well, we probably better start to wrap it up.
Yeah. The last one is the amendment that to the Constitution that Jim Shaw had put forward, and it was good, in my opinion, good intentioned, but I could see the pitfalls of this. For one, when you start adding criteria to a constitution, it limits the scope of that original constitutional, statement, and he
Yeah.
adds into the bottom of our Constitution earlier, parents and legal guardians shall have the right to direct the education of their children, and then that's great. And then it's the legislature shall not regulate schools that do not receive public funds or other means of education. And that's right there is like, well, what's public funds?
Yeah.
Do
Right.
I go to the library now? I'm using
Yeah.
public funds. So and
And I don't think we need any of those clauses because over the years, the other means has suited
Right.
us well.
Yeah.
And even though they're instituting all these new hybrids and muddied waters and infusion of fun, like even though they're doing that, at this point in time, we still have that to, I don't want to say fall back on, but that as our constitutional
Right.
recognition of what we're doing.
Well, and that's the beauty of like the Second Amendment. If they said the right to bear muskets, the Second Amendment would be meaningless today. But it's the right to bear arms. They future-proofed it, and a lot of a lot of wise people from 100, 200 years ago, wrote timeless rights for us, and it's I guess we want to try to protect that.
Yep.
And so
because if they can absolutely name it, they can absolutely ruin it.
Exactly. Right, yeah. And that's why the word homeschooling isn't in there anywhere, and we don't really want it to be.
Right.
There we go.
Well, I think what we need to get, not that they're going to let any of Jim Shaw's bills be heard this year. I still am working on trying to get a tea party together for Lincoln County so they can actually do a Boston Tea Party, since none of them since they're all getting taxed without representation really this year. I still think we need to work something out like that. But I think what we need Representative Shaw to do is to remove the clause in the Constitution that requires mandatory schooling.
Oh, compulsory education
education is where it's all at, because they also they compulse that you attend school, and then they provide the school, which gets all the funding, over 50% of the budget. So how can that even be constitutional? I mean, how can they even be? It's just not.
Well, it's constitutional because they wrote it in there.
Right. I mean, it's just like insurance. We're going to mandate that that you have insurance, and then if you don't have insurance, then one will be provided for you, paid for by all of your taxpayers.
Could probably could talk at length about compulsory education and how it's kind of led to the destruction of the furthering of children's knowledge over time, but that's maybe for another time. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a whole nother can of worms.
We should actually have, that gives me an idea. We should have a whole podcast just to talk about the idea of compulsory education. So I'm making myself
compulsory education roundtable.
Well, there was a bill in I don't know if I can't remember the state, if it was Nevada or Utah. There was a legislator that was trying to end compulsory education in the state, and he'd like gone on a education tour trying to convince people that compulsory education has been the crux of the students' demise in the system, I can go. When people start talking about No Child Left Behind, Every Student Succeeds, Grants 2000, it's like, guys, this has been going on since the demise of education in the United States has been going on since the 60s, or at least they recognized it in the 60s. So.
Right. Well, let's look at the things that we can do. Call to action. This is a list that Robert made, and
right. Yeah. Yeah. So I've read various articles that talk about how many homeschoolers might be in Oklahoma, and I've seen 5 to 10% of the children. So I'm assuming there's 35,000, 70,000. We don't know, and that's fine. But the best advice I can offer is do not take the credit. Talk to your family and friends and try to educate them about what they're getting into. And get involved for sure. Homeschool capital meetups. Chia has a homeschool day, and Homeschool Oklahoma, and these groups like Chia and Homeschool Oklahoma that are up at the Capitol, preserving your freedoms. you really should respect their positions too, because they're fighting real hard to preserve your freedoms. And if you're in there saying, well, I support these groups, but I'm taking the credit, it's like these groups are warning you that you're digging your own grave. So, listen to these groups and follow them. They're giving you good advice. And then of course, talk to your legislators, educate them. And that's a big benefit. Educate your legislators,
Right.
and don't be afraid to talk to them. They're not hard to talk to, I guess.
Yep.
Is what I'd say.
Yep. When I'm up there, when they see me, I ask them if they need my card, and they're like, "No, you're the homeschoolers, and you don't want anything. You want to be left alone." And I'm like, "Absolutely. I just want to pray with you today." And that's what I want them to see us as real people that genuinely care, and we just don't want us, to be dealt to have all this regulation and all these carrots dangled in front of our faces. So, real quick, I'll put a plug in for June 27th and 28th. We have multiple speakers coming. We have Nikki Truesdale, Dara Haldier, and some others coming to give us more encouragement for home education. And it's at Randall University, June 27th and 28th. And you can sign up at ru.edu/expo. And that should be live sometime later this afternoon.
I went to one, like I said, I went to my first, I think it was 2 years ago when I first met Jana, and I was blown over by really opened my eyes to the homeschooling community and how different it is from the public education system. So
thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
No, yeah, it was great. It's definitely worth attending.
So Carrie Bertrand and I, we may be doing a workshop on this whole idea of, we did it 2 years ago, co-ops. What are they? Do I need one? If I do go to one, how do I protect myself, or how do I find the right one that meets the needs, but also keeps me independent of a lot of this regulation type stuff. So.
And you have like we bought a lot of curriculum. You had like a bookstore that one year, and we bought a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The lady was selling all of her Life of Fred books, and we bought the whole collection. So that's I don't know if you do that every year.
Yes, we do. We have a used book sale. We have exhibitors. We have food trucks. We have workshops and activities for teens as well. The activities for them are speech and debate. Group will be coming and demonstrating and involving the kids. We have constitutional coaches that are trained with the whole Rick Green education information, and they do workshops with the teenagers, and so it'll be great.
Well, if you've got a flyer for that, send it to me and I'll stick it in the newsletter for sure.
Awesome. I'm working on all that PR stuff probably the last week of March when I get back from a trip that I'm getting ready
I need to start putting those on the events tab on our website because it's there and I just don't use it. I need to start doing that. So, all right. Anything else?
Nope. The last slide just covers all the organizations that have committed to being against the homeschool tax credit, and then some useful links down at the bottom. CHIA, Homeschool Oklahoma, HSLDA, the legal group that for homeschoolers, and then of course our little our little Facebook page where we get together and chat about school choice activity in regards to homeschoolers.
Yeah.
Yep. I will stick all of those things in. Guys, thank you so much for being with us today. And just, you've given me some really great clips. And I think they're going to be particularly interested, Robert, in the one about them getting looked up on the state database.
Yeah.
That
was a shocker to me.
Super eye-opening. And like, I couldn't keep my jaw. I kept going.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that actually came to a revelation when I was talking about how bad tax credits were, and the response was, "There's like all these tax credits, Why are you making a big deal out of this one?" I'm like, "Well, what do you mean? How many tax credits are there? Because you can only see so many." And then, of course, that was brought to my attention. I was like, "Oh,
yeah,
wow, that's
Julia.
interesting."
I know, wasn't that funny?
Julia, I agree. I think that all the time. My daughter's like wants me to. We're going on a trip, and she wants me to listen to Maze Runner on audio. So that's probably what we'll do. And I'm like, I don't know if I can listen to it. It's like
honestly, I had not read 1984. I think I've said this before on the podcast at some point, but I never did, even though my mom was a literature teacher, right? And an English teacher for my whole life. I never read the classical novels. And so I just stopped. I think like 4 years ago, I just stopped and started reading all the classical novels, and I'd listen to them while I, worked outside, did my farm work. And I think of all of the classics that I read, 2 of them were real standouts. And one of those was 1984, because I had never read 1984 before. And it was so shocking that I cried most of the way through it, because I was like, and that's happening, and that's happening, and that's happening.
I was looking to see. I think I have it back here somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, and people, and I, did Brave New World, listen to Brave New World, like I said, which is why I was like, I don't know that I would do that for younger kids. That's kind of, yeah. I mean, they introduced some topics in that are really super yucky. But the problem is, reading Brave New World, I did the exact same thing. Oh my gosh, they're teaching this crap in schools. This is it. We're doing this and this and this. And so I don't know. It's crazy.
Probably can't get Brave New World in the public school system, but you can definitely get some of those other books that are pretty questionable.
Yeah. I know. And one other thing, since we're talking about literature and books and stuff, I do have a resource room of curriculum. As this thing goes, as progressive things happen, we're going to see that even the homeschool material, even the private school material, is going to become more centralized and standardized. And so eventually, a lot of the good stuff that we're used to, wholesome stuff that we're used to, we're going to have to find at used bookstores, and it's not going to be the main.
We're already there, Jana.
I know, but so I do have a lot. I don't know if you can see titles, but I have a room. This room only has a couple of shelves here, and the ones behind me, and then this one. But I have a room at my church that people have donated their curriculum when they're finished with homeschooling for 20 years. And so I've got a lot of books that are, if you're looking for something wholesome, I mean, the stories themselves aren't always going to be like, they're going to have stuff in them because they're classic literature, but they're not.
Well, shoot, look at the Bible.
I know. So, well, thank you guys so very much. I appreciate it.
Well, you guys are awesome. And Robert, you and the data sheets, holy cow.
Yeah.
I was having fun with that. I imported it into Excel and started manipulating the data.
Oh,
yeah, you are my new go-to on data for sure. So, and we've got to meet again, or we've got to meet actually here next week. So don't forget. Keep that on your calendar. All right, everybody. Sure do appreciate you. I just think you're the best, and thank you for taking time to meet with us. And everybody says, great show, y'all. And everybody appreciates you guys coming on, I know. And so thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you. Love you guys.
Thank you.
All right,
thank
you
you.
too. We'll talk to you soon. All righty. Bye. Are you able to chit chat for just a second, or are you running back to the?
No, I want to give another example on that data manipulation, the statistics manipulation. So I called you last week after my school board meeting with my school board member.
Yes.
And we were talking about a lot of things, and I was kind of bringing up the proficiencies, and my school board member literally says, well, Michael, didn't you see where Edmond Public Schools scores 1.5 points higher than the national average on ACT? And I'm like, okay, I said, and I never heard that, but that's a self-published study with no data whatsoever, no source documents, no anything, just published on Edmond Public Schools website. So the crux of that whole deal is, and this is why I called Jenny, because I was like, look at this. When I bring up Edmond North, which is, the gym of Edmond, that's where you have, all the doctors' kids and everybody. In Edmond North, the math proficiency is 39%, or proficient, or better, or higher. So you mean to tell me that Edmond Public Schools ACT scores are 1.5 points higher than the national average when you have 39% at the best school in Edmond are only proficient in math. I mean, give me a break. No possible way. That's complete manipulation of data.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
Total
I told you this, and
propaganda.
I told you this. What did he say? I'm late to raise a little blood pressure. John's got to get his blood pressure up, so he tunes in. So I told you when we had that conversation, remember what I told you about the fact that studies show that people who have children have parents who have at least a college degree, and certainly more, nearly always test better. I mean, all things being considered, nearly always test better than kids just without anything, because they listen to people. It makes a difference how people talk, because that's how children develop, is by hearing what their parents say. And if their parents have had higher education, they come out. I mean, and it's funny because I often talk about Sam, and I feel bad because Sam is awesome and I love him, but he and I struggled together with schooling, and he just didn't get schooled for numerous years because he just wasn't going to do it. But it's the craziest thing, because now he's in college and he's doing fine. But the point of the matter is that kid can write like I couldn't write like that when I was his age. He is one of the best writers that in our whole family, and certainly even of kids that I taught. I mean, he is just an excellent writer. And sometimes I think to myself, I know I couldn't get you to actually do much work. I mean, is it just because your dad and I have advanced degrees and, that's what you heard? I don't know. But I mean, I think even in my own house, you can kind of see that. Yeah. So that you can't, so much of this garbage is manipulated, and these stats are manipulated, and it's just silly to try to go, oh yeah, that's right.
Well, that, we're talking about that compulsory education roundtable. I think we need to have a compulsory everything roundtable.
Wonder how we could do that. Oh, you know what? We have a friend who this might not be a bad idea. We have a friend who just this morning offered me a space to use. And we may actually do that and invite some people to get together and talk about what that means. Some legislators and maybe some educators and things like that, to just talk about what that means. And we could do a video on that. So I think that that's actually something that we should do. And I think, that we can do. And I think it's something that we should do. So I definitely say, let's make this happen. Maybe we could do that in the fall or in the late summer.
Yeah.
And put together a round table where we invite people to come and talk about what that means.
Yeah. I agree.
That could be fun and interesting. All right. Is there anything on your radar for today?
No.
Nothing.
No.
I will say the wind yesterday about took my house down.
Yeah, it's still going, still blowing.
I know. I'm like, okay, March. This is the reason why I'm not a March fan. I much prefer April. Okay, so on Friday, you and I are going to have about the first hour to ourselves, because Carolyn McClarty, who is our guest on Friday, forgot that she had a legislative breakfast to go to. And so she's going to have to be late to the party. So you and I are going to start off, and we'll talk about what we're going to start off with, but everybody knows it'll be something juicy. And then after we do that, so about 10-ish, I guess, 9:45 or so, Carolyn will come on and she'll talk about the fact that she's restarting a group called Eagle Forum here in Oklahoma. And Eagle Forum, if you don't know who Phyllis Schlafly is, please look it up. If you don't know what the Equal Rights Minute is, please look it up. Those are all really great parts of history to learn about. But Phyllis Schlafly started Eagle Forum back in the 60s when she was fighting the Equal Rights Amendment that was in the federal government. And she was going to law school, raising 4 kids, and being a lobbyist, citizen lobbyist, all at the same time. And she did manage to get the ERA stopped, and we should be very grateful for that, frankly. Julie says, oh, wow. Yes, it's very true. Oh, wow. She is, so she started Eagle Forum. So then Carolyn is trying to restart the Eagle Forum in Oklahoma. And I really would hope all of you who are on this morning and who watch later, if you want a way to lobby as a citizen, but you're not really sure how to do it, Eagle Forum is going to be your best way. I mean, because Carolyn can teach you how to start. She'll, she's been the Republican committee woman for Oklahoma. She'll have to tell us, but I want to say it was 10 years, maybe. So she knows legislation inside and out, and she's great at doing it. And I just really encourage you to be with us on Friday and listen to what she has to say, so that you might want to get involved with her and help her get these things going, because I know she'd appreciate the help. Yeah. So tune in Friday at 9 for me and Michael talking some smack, probably. And then at 10 for Carolyn McClarty.
I got someone at my door has been ringing my doorbell for about 2 minutes.
You better. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. We'll go answer the phone, and we'll see everybody, or the door, and we'll see everybody on Friday. So thanks for tuning in. And as always, if you've got any questions, make sure that you tune in